This is a tremendously significant and sacred occasion for members of the church throughout the world. The first presidency will please arise. It is proposed that we sustain Ezra Taft Benson as prophet, seer, and revelator, and President of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
My brethren and sisters, I want you to know that I know that Christ is at the helm. This is his world. This is his church. His purposes will be accomplished. I know that.
It's a long journey from Whitney, Idaho to the cabinet room of the White House, and then to become the Lord's spokesman to the inhabitants of the earth. But such a journey has been Ezra Taft Benson's. In the pages of his journal and other personal accounts, one catches a glimpse of the path he has traveled from farm boy to prophet of God. That path began here, in the hills and valleys of southeast Idaho.
May 23rd, 1912. Father and Mother returned home from town today with the mail, and both were in tears. They brought us inside and told us Father had received a mission call. We will all need to shoulder the work of the farm. Through her tears, Mother said, "We're so proud that Father is worthy to serve." Separation will be hard for her.
In a matter of weeks, George Benson was 1,500 miles away. At night, Sarah would gather the 7 children around the coal oil lamp in the kitchen and read letters from their missionary father. Ezra recalled, "There came into our home a spirit of missionary work that never left it." In 1921, Ezra himself was called on a mission to Great Britain.
September 13th. The prejudice in this area has been intense. But tonight we addressed a large crowd at South Shields. I spoke with a freedom I had never experienced. Afterwards, I couldn't recall what I had said, but several non-members surrounded me and said, "Tonight, we received a witness that Joseph Smith was a prophet of God, and we are ready for baptism." It was the first experience of that kind I've had, where I knew the Lord was with me.
In 1926, Ezra Taft Benson graduated with honors from Brigham Young University with a degree in animal husbandry. The student body voted him most popular man. When a certain young lady named Flora Amerson returned from her mission to the Hawaiian Islands, it seemed all was aligned for 2 unique lives to become one.
September 10th, 1926. The wedding ceremony was too beautiful for words. Everything was so quiet and peaceful. It all made us so thankful for the restored gospel and all that it holds out to us. Surely we have never been happier.
Loading all their belongings in the back of an old Model T Ford pickup, the couple drove to Ames, Iowa, where less than a year later, Ezra received a master's degree in agricultural economics from Iowa State University. Then it was back to the farm in Whitney, where Ezra reflected, "We expected to spend the rest of our lives, but it was not to be." Before long, the model farm he operated attracted widespread attention, and he was offered the position of county agricultural agent for the University of Idaho. Spending scarcely 30 days at his desk the first year as county agent, he traversed the back roads of southeast Idaho, helping farmers solve their problems. Word of his effectiveness spread, and a promotion took him to the state capital in Boise. Here, he also served as first counselor in the Boise Stake Presidency, and then as stake president. Eventually, national agricultural leaders became aware of this bright and energetic farm specialist from Idaho. In 1939, the National Council of Farmer Cooperatives in Washington, D.C., invited him to become their executive secretary. The the organization's chief operating officer. After much prayer and consideration, the young family moved to Washington.
June 30th, 1939. Spent all day in meetings with the USDA and at the Capitol, lobbying against a certain farm bill. The job appears almost too large for me, but I expect to give it the best I have.
In 1940, the church's first stake in the East was organized in Washington, D.C., and Ezra Taft Benson became its president. Then, 3 years later, while visiting Salt Lake City, an event occurred which would forever change his life.
July 26th, 1943. Was told that President Heber J. Grant wanted to meet with me. He was convalescing from a stroke in his summer home in Emigration Canyon. I was shown into his room where he was resting on the bed. I sat down next to him. He took my hand in both of his and said, "Brother Benson, with all my heart I congratulate you and pray God's blessings to attend you. You have been chosen as the youngest member of the Council of the 12 Apostles." For several minutes, I could only say, "Oh, President Grant, that can't be." He held my hand for a long time as we both shed tears. When I was able to state that I loved the church, he said, "We know that. And the Lord wants men who will give everything for his work."
It would not be long before he would be called upon to do exactly that.
January 29th, 1946. I am leaving today for London for the purpose of reopening missionary work in the war-torn countries of Europe. This is a challenging opportunity for which I am deeply grateful.
During the next 11 months, he traveled over 61,000 often hazardous miles in everything from unheated aircraft to military jeeps. He searched out and met with the starving saints of Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and the rest of occupied Europe.
February 13th. Drove through once beautiful Berlin. The wreckage cannot possibly be understood unless seen. Later, I faced in a half-wrecked auditorium 480 cold, half-starved, but faithful Latter-day Saints. It was an inspiration to see the light of their faith.
Elder Benson oversaw the distribution of 92 boxcars of food, clothing, and bedding to thousands of war-weary saints. He authorized the printing of 5,000 copies of the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, and Pearl of Great Price in German. He organized branches, purchased properties, and rejuvenated missionary work. When he left 11 months later, the saints throughout Europe had a renewed spirit of hope. But challenging missions of service were only beginning for this dedicated disciple of Christ. In 1952, President Dwight D. Eisenhower asked Elder Benson to serve as United States Secretary of Agriculture. His acceptance at the urging of President David O. McKay thrust Elder Benson into intensive government service at its highest levels.
At San Francisco Airport, Secretary of Agriculture Benson and son Reed are welcomed aboard the private plane of Jacqueline Cochran Odlum. The world-famed aviatrix will fly them to El Centro. They next join the $50 a plate diners in the National Guard Armory. Here, Secretary Benson speaks out against continuing rigid wartime price supports, which he says have piled up unmanageable surpluses and reduced farm income.
And as your Secretary of Agriculture, I pledge to you and to farmers everywhere that I will never knowingly support any program or policy which I believe is not in the best interests of our farmers and fair to all of our people, regardless of political pressure.
Upon his return to Utah in 1961, he told the saints in General Conference, "I have had a conviction through all this period that I was where the Lord wanted me to be. I hope and pray that I will always be where He wants me to be." Even though there were several attempts to draft Elder Benson for political office, he declined those overtures and immersed himself totally in the work of the ministry, keeping a schedule that exhausted those trying to keep up. He served as European Mission President with headquarters in Frankfurt, following which he supervised the work of the church in the Orient. He dedicated Italy, Indonesia, and Finland for the preaching of the gospel and organized numerous stakes throughout the world. Wherever he traveled, he was welcomed by high-ranking government officials who admired and respected him for his work in the Eisenhower cabinet.
Well, yes, we're going back to 1982, and Elder LeGrand Richards was well up in his 90s, and a couple of months before that had his leg amputated, and he was deteriorating at the time.
And we came into the office of Elder Richards on a Tuesday afternoon, and there were members of the Boundary and Leadership Change Committee, and after the opening prayer, Elder Richards startled everybody by announcing his resignation as the chairman of that committee. And of course, the other members of the committee protested, and they tried to dissuade him from that. And then he said, when the old man gets to the point that he can't any longer carry his responsibility, he ought to turn it over to one of you younger men.
Then the door opened, and there was an atmospheric change as President Benson walked in.
He says, I'm not going to accept your resignation, but I tell you what I am going to do. I'm going to appoint Brother Marv Ashton as the vice chairman of this committee, and you can delegate as much responsibility as you want to him. But LeGrand, as long as you live, you will be the chairman of this committee. Well, it's the only time in my experience that I've ever seen LeGrand Richards speechless.
But then the thing that happened next is what was heartwarming for me.
A tear formed in his eye, and he grabbed a hold. He was on a prosthesis at this time. And he grabbed a hold of his big black leather armchair there, and he boosted himself up, and then he worked himself away around the desk. And then President Benson stood up when he saw he was coming around, and the two grabbed each other by the arms. And then he looked up into President Benson's face and said, President, I love you. And President Benson responded, LeGrand, I love you. And then they embraced.
Over the years, he would repeatedly emphasize the home and family in his teachings. Few subjects were closer to his heart. His beloved Flora was one of his greatest sources of strength and comfort. He would often refer to their wedding day, September 10th, 1926, as the day life began. For over 30 years, she had worn daily a golden pendant her husband had given her inscribed, to Flora, for constant help, devotion, and inspiration. As 1985 drew to a close, he would discover just how much that inspiration from loved ones and from on high was needed. On the evening of November 5th, 1985, President Benson received word that Spencer W. Kimball, the man he had loved and served with for 42 years, was gone. He and Flora dropped to their knees. In his journal, he recorded, I have never felt weaker, and never before have I felt the influence of the Spirit in such great strength. May the good Lord sustain me as I go forward humbly. He chose Elders Gordon B. Hinckley and Thomas S. Monson to serve as his first and second counselors, respectively. From that day, the love and loyalty manifest by the First Presidency has been a lesson in unity for the entire church.
President Benson seemed to have been cradled by the Lord and prepared for the role he now serves as President of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Men of letters and men and women of distinction come to visit him here at the church office building, but he is never happier than when children come to meet with him. They like the glow in his eyes, and they like his warm smile. And when he embraces these little ones, one thinks of the passage from the Lord, suffer the little children to come unto me, and forbid them not, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. When one looks at Ezra Taft Benson, one can say, here's a man for all seasons. I say to the world, he is a prophet of God.
The Lord never makes a mistake. It is He who has chosen, nurtured, cultivated, and directed this His chosen servant. He stands now at the summit of his life, a man whose entire career from boyhood to old age has been consistent in his attention to duty. I extend my love to this great and choice servant who has been called, appointed, and anointed of the Lord to stand as a prophet to this people.
I have a vision of homes alerted, of classes alive, and of pulpits aflame with the spirit of Book of Mormon messages. My beloved saints, I do not know fully why God has preserved my life to this age, but I do know this, that for the present hour, He has revealed to me the absolute need for us to move the Book of Mormon forward now in a marvelous manner. God willing, I intend to spend all my remaining days in that glorious effort.